A Small World talks about mental illness and addiction in homeless people, and it's a representation of Housing First program, which is the philosophy that if you take homeless people and place them into housing, their lives will, significantly be better. But the population that we looked at in this film still talked about all the issues that the people still had. Even though they had homes, they still had mental illness, they still had addictions, and they were having a lot of trouble finding services for that as well. It sort of morphed into this idea. We had seen so many newspaper articles in Gainesville, Florida, just about 1 week after the next, there was homeless people weren't allowed to do this anymore, and they were being criminalized, and they weren't allowed to be fed, and they wanted, homeless people to move completely out of the city. And it was a lot of things that were talked about, in Nick's film. But we were just having trouble finding an end to the story, actually. And we were sort of following people within this tent city community. A large portion of the homeless people lived in the woods in tents. So we thought that was really interesting, but it got to be a little bit dangerous. So we just found Shamal really charming, and we found all of the people that he worked with just really, they were really eager to share their story and talk about the things that, they found really complicated, with so much bravery, actually, that I think myself, I would have trouble really talking about like the biggest problems in my life. I don't know if it's pride or embarrassment or whatever, but they were just really honest about, the things that they were struggling with. The biggest struggle with making this film, I think, was just being ready at any time to capture what was happening. We didn't really have an opportunity to slow down or to rest at all, because we were dealing with so many different people that just had, internal conflicts, and then trying to show them getting along in their day. We just had to be ready at any moment. And then I think too, it got really intense for me by the end. Like, I was just really exhausted by being around people that just had the most horrific stories to tell about their past, and that was interfering with their present, and the future just seemed very hopeless for them. So it really, really drew me down a lot. And when I finished the project, I just felt like a lot lighter. Almost everybody has a neighbor or has seen someone walk down the street talking to themselves, and that's something that most people can relate to. So we actually looked a little further into the person that does that, and I think there's a lot of fear based on the idea of being homeless and mentally ill. Some of the people that are mentally ill are very violent, most are not. When I've shown it in audiences, I think at first, we tried to put as much humor into it as we could, because Shamal is a very humorous person. And so is Dale, and so is Kat, actually. They all have these really great sense of humor, so we just tried to put as much humor, but we found that audiences at first were kind of afraid to laugh. It's like, you think, this is such a horrible thing, but it could be funny. So I think just the idea of giving people the permission to talk about these issues without feeling really weighed down by them, I think is really beneficial.